There's a stark rule in the wild. Animals don't seek out humans unless desperation forces them to. It's practically unheard of for a mighty grizzly bear, one of nature's most formidable predators, to approach a person, whimpering for assistance. Yet here we are at the edge of Yosemite National Park, unraveling a story so rare, so profound, it challenges every assumption we hold about the boundary between man and beast. Imagine hearing a guttural cry echo across towering pines, realizing it's not a warning growl but a plea for help. Picture stepping forward, heart hammering, to see a massive grizzly with pain in her eyes. Her fur is matted, her posture unsteady, and she's not snarling or charging. She's begging. In that moment, a park ranger named John, who believed he'd seen it all, realized he was face to face with an event most wildlife experts never witness in their entire lives. What could wound a creature so powerful that she'd risk seeking out a human? And beyond the immediate shock, what about the fragility hidden in her story, her mysterious vulnerability, and the secret she carried just beneath her ragged breath? Stay with me, because as we follow this ranger's journey, you'll discover more than a rescue. You'll see the surprising bond that forms under extreme circumstances, and you'll witness how compassion can cross even the most instinctual of barriers. By the end, this bear's cry for help will not only leave your heart racing, it might just reaffirm your faith in the power of empathy. But first, we return to the dawn of a fateful morning, where this entire saga began in the hush of Yosemite's Grand Forest. Daybreak in Yosemite is a symphony, the golden light slipping through centuries-old sequoias, the distant gurgle of streams winding around mossy stones, and birds warming up their morning chorus. For Ranger John, these sights and sounds define his life's work. He's guarded these trails for over a decade, long enough to know every hidden bend and the subtle shift of each season. Yet, on this particular morning, John notices something off the moment he leaves his small ranger station. The usual playful chatter of squirrels seems muted, and a strange hush drapes the valley. It's as though the forest itself is holding its breath. He brushes aside the feeling at first. Nature can be unpredictable after all, but a tingle of unease still gnaws at him. John's routine begins with a quick check of the nearest campsite. He expects to find leftover trash or an occasional lost hiker needing direction. Instead, everything is eerily clean and empty. He climbs into his dusty truck, navigates the gravel road with practiced ease, and heads deeper into the park. Over the radio, a colleague's voice crackles in with benign updates. No major tourist incidents, minimal fire risk, and a mild forecast. In other words, an uneventful day. But John's instincts tug, whispering otherwise. Pulling over near a trailhead, he steps out to breathe in the crisp air. The scent of pine and damp earth soothes him, as it always has. He spent his childhood dreaming of living among these towering giants, convinced that nature held secrets worth protecting. And so he trained, worked his way up, and now stands as a seasoned ranger who has guided countless travelers, rescued more than a few lost souls, and even encountered the region's bears a time or two. Yet none of those experiences compare to what's brewing this morning. John takes a few steps along a well-worn path, scanning for signs of wildlife. Under normal circumstances, he might see deer munching on grass or hear the chatter of jays swooping overhead. Instead, the silence presses in. A few yards in, he stops abruptly. There's a track in the dirt, a partial paw print. It's huge, unmistakably belonging to a grizzly, though the outline seems scuffed, as if the animal might be limping or dragging its paw. He crouches to inspect it. Grizzlies aren't typically so close to this side of the park during daylight, especially not without foraging. His first concern is human safety. If a bear is roaming injured, it could be desperate. Returning to his truck, he radios a brief alert to other rangers, advising them to keep watch. A colleague jokes about John being paranoid, but John's no stranger to trusting his gut. Moving deeper into the forest on foot, he senses the hush again. The breeze rustles the treetops, sending ribbons of filtered light across the trail. Normally, this scene would fill him with calm, but a question persists. Why is this bear walking so erratically, and where is it heading? A twig snaps somewhere ahead, then stillness returns. John's heart thuds in anticipation. The forest feels poised, as though it's concealing something monumental. Little does he know that in mere minutes, he'll stumble on a sight that transforms his life's mission from routine patrol to the most critical rescue he's ever attempted. Rounding a bend, John halts at a sound he's never quite heard from a grizzly. Not the aggressive grunt or the familiar rummage of foraging. This is more like a low moan, heavy with distress. A chill runs through him. He inches forward, pushing aside a thick cluster of ferns. And there she is, a full-grown grizzly bear, body slumped, fur disheveled, emitting the most pitiful whimper he can imagine. He should be wary. A bear this size can maul a person in seconds, especially if it feels cornered. But what he sees replaces caution with profound empathy. A patch of dark, matted fur on her flank, glistening in the weak sunlight. It's more than dirt. There's blood, quite a bit. She's wounded, and not just a scratch. A glimpse of raw flesh confirms it's a deep laceration. Infection is likely. John's practiced eye tells him she's in real trouble. Instinctively, he checks the surroundings for cubs or signs of aggression. But there's no immediate indication of others. This mother bear, the presence of swollen teats clarifies that, has dragged herself here, away from prying eyes, or perhaps hoping for a safer location. Seeing a human approach, she doesn't lunge or roar. Instead, her gaze pleads, and a faint whine escapes her muzzle. John's heart catches. He's encountered wounded wildlife before, but never a creature this majestic, so blatantly seeking assistance. He thinks about the protocols: keep a safe distance, contact the veterinary team, refrain from sudden moves. Still, some part of him can't just radio help and stand back. He kneels, voice soft. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The bear shifts slightly, revealing more of the wound. Each laborious breath rattles her massive frame. She flinches at her own pain. John wonders, what caused this? A fight with another bear? A run-in with poachers? A snare trap? Or maybe a freak accident in the rough terrain? Adrenaline spikes. He grabs his handheld radio, pressing the button with urgent intensity. "Base, this is Ranger John. I've located a severely injured grizzly in Sector 3. She's alive but bleeding badly. I need veterinary support ASAP. Likely sedation required." "Over." A crackle of static, then a concerned voice. "Copy, John. Team dispatching from the main center. ETA, roughly an hour. Maintain a safe distance." An hour? John wonders if she can hold on that long. He edges a few steps closer, trying to gauge her reaction. Instead of lunging, she lowers her head, as if surrendering to the only option left. Gently he speaks again, reciting the kind of calming words he might use for a lost hiker in shock. It's odd, comforting a bear, but her eyes shimmer with something akin to trust. Like she knows this stranger might be her only chance. He notices dried milk on her underside, a clear sign she's nursing. Panic tugs at his thoughts. If she's in this condition, where are her cubs? Mother bears rarely separate from them willingly unless forced. Could they be hidden in some nearby thicket, mewling for her return? This possibility shakes him deeply. Still, first things first. Keep her alive until help arrives. He rummages in his pack for a half-full water bottle and extends it, nerves rattling. The bear's enormous paw lifts tentatively, then rests near him. She sniffs, eventually licking at the water trickling over his fingertips. It's not much, but it's a moment of raw, fragile connection. Part of John wants to recoil at the sight of those 4-inch claws, yet he can't ignore the vulnerability. Before he can dwell on it, he hears the faint thump-thump of a helicopter in the distance. Relief floods through him. Help is on its way, but a single question hammers in the back of his mind. If this mother is out here, injured and alone, where are her babies, and can he save them in time? As the helicopter's roar grows louder, John waves his flashlight in wide arcs to guide the incoming team through a small clearing. Dust and pine needles whirl in the rotor's gust, creating a chaotic swirl of light and shadow. The bear stirs, letting out a low groan. John gently places a hand on her shoulder, murmuring calming words that likely mean nothing to her intellectually, but everything emotionally. The helicopter lands and the scene shifts from eerie stillness to rushed medical triage. A veterinarian named Sarah steps out, flanked by two more rangers. Their faces reflect urgency and a hint of disbelief at the sight before them. A grizzly lying there, subdued, and a ranger kneeling at her side like they share some fragile bond. Sarah doesn't waste time. She crouches, quickly assessing the wound. "It's deep," she mutters, glancing at John. "We'll need sedation to transport her safely. Infection's already setting in." Carefully, she administers a tranquilizing dose, mindful not to push the bear past her limits. The mother bear resists slightly, a groan escaping her, but soon her taut muscles relax. Her eyes flutter, caught between pain and drowsy surrender. The team lifts her onto a sturdy stretcher, each step accompanied by terse instructions. "Easy. Watch the flank. Keep her balanced." John helps, feeling the bear's incredible weight shift under the straps. Once secured, they maneuver her into the helicopter. A sudden pang hits him as her limp head lolls. He's grown strangely protective. This is no mere wildlife case. She approached him for help, trusting in her own wild way that he might provide it. Sarah calls out over the din. "We'll do emergency treatment at the park clinic. She's got a fighting chance, but we can't waste time." John watches as the helicopter takes off, rotors pounding the air, the wounded bear locked within. The swirl of dust stings his eyes, or perhaps it's emotion that makes them water. The machine shrinks in the sky, carrying hope and worry in equal measure. An echo of quiet returns, but it feels different now. This place is no longer just an ordinary clearing. It's the site of an extraordinary moment, an intersection of human empathy and animal desperation. The mother bear is gone, suspended between life and death in the skilled hands of professionals. John's shoulders sag, exhaustion mingling with determination. He's done what he can for her immediate survival. Now he thinks of those cubs. A mother grizzly wouldn't leave them willingly. If she's wounded, they might be wandering or hiding, vulnerable to predators or starvation. The time to find them is dangerously short. John radios a quick update. "Mother bear in transit. I'm searching for cubs." A colleague advises caution, suggesting he wait for backup. But John has no time for bureaucracy. He's guided countless hikers, scoured miles of forest for missing persons. Now he'll do the same for two small lives that have never asked for human intervention, until their mother's injury forced their fate into his hands. He glances around. The forest stands tall and silent, as if waiting to see if he'll truly follow through. Straightening, he secures his gear and sets off, determined to chase every clue, every whisper, until he finds them. A vow forms in his mind. He will bring them back to their mother, or else lose all faith in his duty as a ranger. Early dawn light casts long shadows across the forest floor, painting it in pinks and golds. John trudges through brush, heart pounding with each step. It's been several hours since the helicopter lifted off, and though fatigue gnaws at his legs, an urgency greater than exhaustion keeps him going. He replays details of the mother bear's location, how the track pattern suggested she might have traveled from higher ground. If her cubs were left behind, they might still be somewhere along that route, waiting helplessly. Lacking any better lead, he starts scanning the undergrowth for any sign: tracks, disturbed leaves, maybe tiny paw prints. The forest is alive with intangible tension. A few birds call out, but their voices feel muffled by the thick canopy. Every so often, John halts, listening for any whimper or rustle that doesn't belong. He doesn't want to spook the cubs. If they sense him as a threat, they might scatter and become even harder to locate. Time crawls. His water canteen grows lighter. The sun arcs higher, warming the air, intensifying the sense of pine needles and moist earth. Images flash through his mind. Small, helpless cubs, mewling for a mother who can't return. The thought twists his stomach. Then a flicker of movement draws his eye to a patch of ferns ahead. He crouches, edging closer. At first, it's just a swirl of leaves, but then a soft noise reaches his ears. A faint, high-pitched whine. Heart leaping, John parts the foliage gently. Two tiny grizzly cubs, their fur a rich cinnamon hue, huddle together. They're so small, not much bigger than a house cat, trembling and wide-eyed. One lifts its head, staring at John with a mixture of terror and longing, as though uncertain if he's their salvation or another threat. His breath catches. This is them, her cubs. Relief and dread collide. Relief that they're alive. Dread at how vulnerable they appear. They recoil at his approach, pressing further back under a toppled log, whimpering softly. John speaks in a low voice, the same quiet calm he used with their mother. Hey, little ones, it's okay. I'm here to help. He remembers some guidelines for wildlife rescue. Minimize sudden movement, keep your voice steady, offer a gentle presence. He also recalls that these cubs might not survive the day without their mother's milk or professional care. Sensing they're starving, he rummages in his pack for dried berries. Placing a small handful on the ground, he nudges them closer with an outstretched hand. The cubs sniff the air. One, bolder than the other, advances, nose quivering. After a moment's hesitation, it snatches a berry, retreating to chew. John exhales, tension in his chest easing slightly. He repeats the offering until both cubs nibble the treats, inching nearer with each taste. Gradually, they stop huddling so tightly, though fear still lingers in their eyes. A few more minutes of patience, and he realizes he needs a plan to transport them. Carrying two wriggling, clawed bear cubs across rugged terrain is no small feat. Spotting a down jacket from his gear, he fashions a makeshift sling for one cub, cradling it against his chest. The other, slightly braver, he coaxes into his backpack, top unzipped so it can peek out. Their combined weight is substantial, but adrenaline fuels him. He stands, adjusting carefully. The cubs whimper softly, uncertain but too weak to protest. Before turning back toward the trailhead, John glances at the morning sun filtering through the treetops. Something about this moment, these tiny forms relying on him for everything, stirs him deeply. He pictures their mother in the clinic, fighting off infection. He vows under his breath, "Hang on, Mama Bear. I'm bringing them home." The journey back feels like a saga in its own right. With one cub pressed against his jacket and another poking curious eyes out of a modified backpack, John navigates a winding path strewn with roots, rocks, and low branches. Every jolt or sudden movement triggers anxious squirming from the cubs, so he slows his pace to keep them calm. It doubles his travel time but spares them undue panic. Occasionally, he pauses to offer them water from a small bottle or another dried berry. The cub in his backpack nuzzles at his neck, letting out occasional squeaks, as if complaining about the bumpy ride. Despite the sweat matting his hairline and the burn in his muscles, John can't help but smile at their innocence. Midway through, he encounters a tricky slope. Loose gravel threatens to send him slipping, but he plants his boots firmly, inching down. The cubs grow restless, emitting tiny growls. John whispers, "Easy, guys, almost there." For a heartbeat, he imagines them reuniting with their mother, her relief, their frantic cuddling under her protective paw. He grips that mental image as inspiration to push on. After what feels like hours, a familiar signpost comes into view, marking the trailhead that leads to the main ranger station. Relief washes over him at the sight of a parked vehicle with the park's insignia. Two colleagues rush forward, eyes widening at the precarious cargo. They help John transfer the cubs into a secure crate, one lined with blankets. The little bears whine, but with a soothing tone from John, they settle down. An intense wave of exhaustion hits him, but he still radios a quick status. "Cubs found and safe, heading to the veterinary clinic." A voice crackles back. "Copy that. Great work, John. Over." He nods, a half smile on his face. Great work indeed, yet the hardest parts might still be ahead. They load the cubs gently into a parked vehicle, and John follows in his own truck, focusing on the road. His mind churns with questions. How is the mother bear faring? Has she deteriorated, or is she stable? Will she accept her cubs back after the human intervention? Wrestling with these worries, he grips the steering wheel, urging the truck to go faster along the narrow roads. Finally, the veterinary clinic, a modest building nestled at the edge of the wilderness, comes into view. He pulls in, heart pounding. Within minutes, the cubs are whisked inside, staff hurrying to do initial checks. John lingers at the doorway, a mixture of pride and apprehension washing over him. Something deep inside tells him that reuniting this family could be the difference between life and death for the mother, and a defining moment in his own career. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a test of compassion. And though the cubs are safe for now, the next chapter involves bridging the gap between them and the mother whose instinct drove her to an unimaginable act, seeking help from the very species she'd normally avoid. John closes his eyes, replaying the events. The wounded bear, her pleading eyes, the helicopter ride, and now two cubs in the clinic. For all the ranger training he's received, nothing prepared him for an odyssey quite like this. John trudges through the clinic's sterile hallways, still wearing the mud-stained uniform from his trek. Outside a large observation window, he spots the mother bear lying on a bed of straw, bandages wrapping her flank. Vets hover around her, monitoring vitals. Machines beep softly, filling the air with nervous energy. Her breaths are slow and heavy, but at least she's alive. The cubs, meanwhile, occupy a separate enclosure. They pace back and forth, emitting soft cries, likely sensing their mother's presence, but unable to reach her. John approaches the glass, heart clenching at the sight. He gestures to a veterinarian named Sarah, the same one who arrived by helicopter. "How is she?" he asked quietly. Sarah's expression is guardedly hopeful. "She pulled through initial surgery. We cleaned out the infection and stitched the wound. She's responding to antibiotics, but we're not out of the woods yet." Glancing at the cubs, she adds, "They're restless, missing her scent." John stares at them, these two tiny creatures caged only until they can be safely reunited. Their wide eyes flick to him, almost recognizing the human who plucked them from the forest floor. He sets a gentle hand on the glass, feeling the weight of their trust. "She came to me for help," he murmurs. "I can't let her down." Sarah nods. "If she stabilizes, we'll attempt a cautious reintroduction. But first, she needs rest. We don't want to stress her too soon, or she might reject them under sedation." John understands. A mother bear's instincts can shift under medical intervention, but he recalls how she let him approach, let him see her wound, even drank from his water bottle. There's a bond there unspoken. Days pass in a blur of evaluations, careful feeding, and antibiotic injections. John becomes a fixture at the clinic, splitting time between the mother's pen and the cubs area. He whispers encouragement to her, though he doubts she grasps his words. Still, she sometimes lifts her head, her dark eyes softening as though acknowledging him. In quieter moments, he sits beside the cubs, offering gentle gestures. They respond with curiosity, batting at his sleeves with little paws, nibbling at pieces of fruit. Each small sign of trust reaffirms his commitment. The staff, too, notice how his presence calms the bears, bridging a fragile gap between human and wildlife. At last, Sarah approaches with hopeful news. "Her vitals have improved. We think it's time for a partial introduction. We'll keep a barrier at first so she doesn't feel overwhelmed or accidentally injure them." John's pulse quickens. The idea that these cubs might once again tuck themselves against their mother's warm fur ignites a surge of anticipation. He stands behind a protective glass as two technicians carry the cubs into the mother's enclosure, one at a time, maintaining a safety partition in case the mother reacts poorly. The mother bear sniffs the air, stirring from her bed. The cubs let out shrill cries, bounding forward as far as the barrier allows. A rumbling sound emanates from the mother, neither a growl nor a warning, but something gentler, as if she recognizes them. John's throat tightens. This is the moment he's fought for, seeing the look in her eyes transform from weary pain to maternal relief. Though physically separated by a modest fence, the reunion in spirit is immediate. She leans closer to them, nostrils twitching, and the cubs press against the wire with tiny paws. It's heartbreakingly beautiful. Two small bundles, desperately wanting their mother's warmth, and a wounded mother, battered yet alive, longing to embrace them. He steps back, giving them space, tears threatening. Whatever comes next, one truth stands out. Sometimes compassion alone can bridge gaps that fear could never erase. Another week passes, brimming with cautious optimism. Every day, the mother bear grows stronger. Her bandages change regularly, the infection receding under antibiotic therapy. Her cubs gain weight, scurrying around their enclosure with growing confidence. Technicians measure their progress, marveling at how quickly they're adapting to these unusual circumstances. John becomes a common sight, chatting softly with them through the barrier. He's no veterinarian, but he's the one who found them, the one who carried them to safety. Something about that link calms the cubs. They've come to expect his gentle voice, even batting playfully at his boots through the mesh. Meanwhile, the mother bear, who once lay on the brink of death, now lifts her head each time John enters the clinic area, as if acknowledging him as an ally. Eventually, the team agrees it's time for direct contact between mother and cubs. No barriers. The sedation is reduced. The mother is stable enough not to lash out in confusion or pain. Cautiously, the staff open a hinged partition, guiding the cubs inside. There's a moment of tense stillness as the mother, upright on her haunches, sniffs the air. The cubs freeze, uncertain. Then recognition blossoms. She emits a deep, resonant sound that's neither a roar nor a warning. It's closer to a welcome, a primal mother's call. They rush toward her, tumbling over one another in their eagerness. She nuzzles them, big paw sweeping them close. The emotional wave in that room could flood an ocean. Relief, triumph, awe. Staff members cheer softly, some with tears in their eyes. John stands at the back, arms folded, chest tight with gratitude. This is what he fought for. A family restored, a second chance snatched from the jaws of tragedy. In the following days, mother and cubs share a large enclosure, allowing the mother to regain her strength. John watches them from an observation window, remembering the day he found her, the day she risked everything to approach him. If that single moment hadn't happened, if she'd stayed hidden in the forest, these cubs might be orphans by now. Or worse. One afternoon, Sarah approaches him with an excited gleam. She's healing well enough that we're thinking of releasing them back into a secluded part of the park soon. She'll need natural space to fully recover. We'd love for you to monitor them, see if she can reintegrate. John's heart leaps at the idea. This is more than a job. It's a personal mission. Count me in, he says, voice brimming with resolve. They discuss logistics, picking a location teeming with fish, berries, and minimal human traffic. John volunteers to scout it, ensuring no hidden hazards lurk there. The veterinarian team arranges a specialized transport crate. The mother bear, still sporting faint scars, tolerates the humans in her domain with quiet acceptance, as though she knows they saved her life. Yet amid the excitement, a lingering fear hovers. How will she readapt to the wild after weeks under human care? Will the cubs revert to their natural instincts or remain dependent on the human presence that once rescued them? John lingers by the enclosure at dusk, watching the sunset gild the mother bear's fur in gold. He knows he can't keep them in captivity. Their destiny is among the towering pines and hidden streams. Still, letting go stings more than he ever expected. Life occasionally deals us encounters that reshape who we are. For John, it's this mother bear's unwavering silent plea. She forced him to confront the rawest edges of compassion, and in doing so, taught him that we all share one wild, fragile world. The day of release dawns clear and bright. A sturdy trailer, lined with soft bedding, transports the mother bear and her two energetic cubs to a secluded valley at Yosemite's edge. A place with fresh water, plentiful shelter, and enough distance from tourists to foster a peaceful reintegration. John arrives ahead of them, double-checking the terrain. The calm hush of morning envelops everything, as if nature itself anticipates what's coming next. When the trailer doors swing open, the bears step onto the dewy grass. The mother sniffs the air, cautious but not fearful, while the cubs scamper around her legs, their curiosity unbounded. She pauses, glancing back only once, catching sight of John standing at a respectful distance. Their eyes lock for a fleeting heartbeat, a silent farewell, and a mutual gratitude. Then, with a surge of energy, the family disappears into the undergrowth, leaving behind only rustling foliage. No grand ceremony or parted seas, just a graceful return to the domain where they belong. John exhales, a knot of pride and melancholy lodged in his chest. This triumph is complete only if they thrive without further human intervention. He sets up a remote observation post determined to watch from afar, stepping in only if absolutely necessary. In the days that follow, he records glimpses of them fishing in a winding creek, venturing up rocky slopes and resting beneath tall pines. Their resilience is stunning, their bond unbroken. If this story moves you, consider sharing it with someone who believes in the quiet power of empathy. Perhaps, like this mother bear, we all have moments where we desperately need another's help. And perhaps, like John, we all hold the capacity to answer that call. Thank you for being part of this journey. Remember, compassion can bridge even the widest divide between species, reminding us that in the face of adversity, hope endures.